He was pushing his cleaning cart through the emergency department, quietly, unnoticed like he always did, until that young doctor ran up in a panic screaming, "Help me! The bleeding won't stop!" That's when the old man dropped his mop, washed his hands, and said just 3 words, "I've got this." The doctor was shocked at first. Then she saw the faded tattoo on his arm. That tattoo was the kind only one group of people could earn, and that group saved lives on battlefields. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments, from which city are you watching this video today? And if you believe real warriors never forget their own, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. St. Mary's Medical Center in downtown Cleveland had the kind of sterile efficiency that most American hospitals wore like a badge. Third shift was always the quietest, somewhere between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., when the fluorescent lights hummed a little softer and the hallways stretched longer than they seemed during the day. The emergency department never really slept, though. Trauma bays stayed lit, monitors beeped their electronic lullabies, and residents stumbled through their rotations with coffee-stained scrubs and bloodshot eyes. And every night, without fail, Michael Thompson pushed his gray utility cart through those same hallways. Most people didn't know his first name. His hospital badge read simply, M. Thompson, Environmental Services. 67 years old, gray beard trimmed military short, always in the same navy blue uniform shirt and dark pants. Clean black boots that never squeaked on the polished floors. 12 years he'd been mopping these corridors, never called in sick, never showed up late, never caused problems. The man was as reliable as the sunrise and about as noticed by most of the medical staff. Thompson had a routine that never varied. Clock in at 10 p.m. sharp, start with the ICU on the 4th floor, work his way down. Emergency department last, because that's where the real mess usually happened. He'd finish around 5:30 a.m., clock out, drive home in his '98 Ford pickup, and sleep until evening. The staff knew him as a ghost. Always there, never intrusive, never speaking unless spoken to. Some of the nurses had tried making conversation over the years. Thompson would nod, give short answers, then get back to work. Not rude, just private. What they didn't know was that Michael Thompson had habits that went deeper than routine. The way he automatically scanned every room for exits, how he noticed which electrical outlets were closest to each patient bed. The fact that he could tell the difference between normal medical distress and genuine emergency just by the tone of someone's voice 2 rooms away. Habits that most environmental services workers didn't need to have. Dr. Sarah Chen had been a resident at St. Mary's for 8 months now, and the 3rd shift still kicked her ass. 28 years old, Johns Hopkins Med School, top 10% of her class. None of that mattered when you were running on 3 hours of sleep and your 4th cup of coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago. Tonight was typical for a Tuesday. 2 MVCS, motor vehicle collisions, had come in back to back. An elderly man with chest pain who turned out to be having his 2nd MI. A construction worker who'd managed to nail gun his own hand to a piece of plywood. Just another night in Cleveland emergency medicine. Chen had noticed Thompson before, the way you notice furniture, always there, part of the landscape. He moved through the ED like he had some kind of internal GPS, never getting in anyone's way, never making noise. His cart had supplies she sometimes needed, extra towels when a trauma got messy, trash bags when the regular ones overflowed. If she'd bothered to really look, she might have noticed things that didn't quite fit. The way Thompson's eyes automatically tracked to the monitors when he cleaned near patient beds. How he positioned himself where he could see both the ambulance bay and the trauma rooms. The fact that when codes were called overhead, he would pause for just a second, like he was listening for something specific. But Chen was a resident. She saw what was right in front of her, which was usually whatever crisis needed her immediate attention. Thompson, for his part, had been watching the new residents cycle through for 12 years. They came and went like seasonal changes. Some lasted, some didn't. Some were cocky, some were terrified. Chen seemed steady enough, but green. Very green. He'd seen her handle routine cases well enough, but he'd also seen her hands shake when things got complicated. Not from fear, from inexperience. The kind of inexperience that could get people killed if they weren't careful. The radio crackled at 1:47 a.m. St. Mary's, incoming trauma. 19-year-old male, motorcycle versus semi-truck, massive hemorrhaging, ETA 4 minutes. Chen felt her stomach drop. Dr. Martinez, the attending, was upstairs in surgery. The other residents were handling a multi-car accident in trauma 2 and 3. It was going to be just her, 2 nurses, and whatever skills she'd managed to accumulate in 8 months of residency. The ambulance bay doors crashed open. The paramedics wheeled in a kid who looked like he should be worrying about college finals, not fighting for his life. Marcus Williams, according to the paperwork. 19 years old, motorcycle enthusiast, and currently bleeding out faster than Chen had ever seen. "What have we got?" she called out, pulling on gloves as the gurney rolled into Trauma 1. "Compound fracture of the left femur with massive bleeding," the lead paramedic reported. "Lost consciousness twice en route, pressures dropping fast. We've got 2 large bore IVs running, but we can't keep up with the blood loss." Chen's hands were already working, checking pulse, airways, breathing. The kid was pale as paper and getting worse by the second. His left leg was mangled. She could see bone fragments and what looked like a major arterial tear. "Get me 4 units of O-negative stat," she called to the trauma nurse. "And Page Surgery, we need an OR yesterday." But even as she worked, Chen could feel control slipping away. The bleeding wasn't responding to direct pressure. The kid's vitals were crashing. She'd studied for this scenario 100 times in medical school, but real blood didn't behave like textbook diagrams. Her hands started to shake. Outside in the hallway, Thompson had stopped his cart. He'd heard the radio call, heard the commotion. Now he stood in the doorway of Trauma 1, watching a young resident try to save a life she wasn't quite ready to save. He'd seen this before. Different hospital, different war, but the same desperate fight against time and death. "Nurse, get Dr. Martinez on the phone, stat." Chen's voice was cracking with strain. "I'm losing him." The nurse rushed to the phone, but Martinez was at least 10 minutes away. Marcus's pulse was dropping. Chen's inexperience was written all over her face. That's when a calm voice cut through the chaos. "Let me help." Chen turned her head. Thompson stood in the doorway of the trauma room. He'd removed his cleaning gloves and was washing his hands with antiseptic. "What?" You're the janitor," Chen said, bewildered. Thompson looked at her. In his eyes was something Chen had never seen before. Authority, determination, experience. "I've got this," Thompson said those 3 words quietly. Chen's mind was racing, but the patient was dying. There was no time. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped back. Thompson approached Marcus and within seconds assessed the bleeding. His fingers were experienced, quick, but also incredibly gentle. "Femoral artery," he said to himself, voice low but clear. Not completely severed, but major laceration. Chen froze. These medical terms, this assessment. How did a janitor know this? Thompson's hands moved like a surgeon's. First, he found the pressure point, then quickly but controlledly focused on the tear. "Nurse, 4-0 suture, stat," he ordered, no hesitation in his voice. The nurse was confused but obeyed. Thompson's authority filled the room. "Normal saline, 2 units, now." Chen just watched. The man was working like he'd done this for decades. His hands weren't shaking, he wasn't making a sound, but every movement was perfect. 10 minutes later, the bleeding stopped. Marcus's pulse began to strengthen. "Continue saline infusion," Thompson told the nurse. "Monitor blood pressure. He'll need surgery, but he's stable now." Chen had been holding her breath, watching. What this man had just done was beyond what she'd learned in 3 years of medical school. Thompson removed his gloves, washed his hands, and started walking toward his cleaning cart. "Wait," Chen's voice cracked. Who are you?" Thompson stopped. He looked at her. For the first time, Chen could clearly see his arm. Under his shirt sleeve, a faded but clear tattoo was visible. Chen moved closer, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. This man, this janitor who'd been invisible for 8 months, had just performed trauma surgery with the confidence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Thompson's sleeve had rolled up during the procedure. Now Chen could see it clearly, a tattoo on his left forearm, faded but unmistakable. 2 crossed anchors with a caduceus in the center. Below it, in simple black letters, FMF. Chen's breath caught. Fleet Marine Force. She'd learned about these guys in medical history class, Navy hospital corpsmen who served with Marine units, combat medics who performed battlefield medicine under fire. You were a corpsman," she whispered. Thompson looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Hospital corpsman, served with 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines." "Where?" Chen's voice was barely audible. "Vietnam, 2 tours, then Iraq in 2003. The words hit Chen like a physical blow. This man standing in front of her, this quiet janitor who'd been mopping floors while she struggled through residency, was a decorated combat medic. He'd been saving lives while she was still in diapers. "How many?" she asked, not even sure what she meant. Thompson understood. Official count was 47, but numbers don't mean much when you're in the field. 47 lives. Chen had saved exactly 0 lives tonight without Thompson's help. "Why didn't you ever?" "Nobody asked," Thompson said simply. He pulled his sleeve down, covering the tattoo, and it's not something you bring up in casual conversation. The next morning, Chen couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She'd gone home to her studio apartment in Lakewood, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself at her laptop, searching. Master Chief Michael Thompson, USN. The records were sparse. Most military medical personnel files weren't public, but what she found made her hands shake. A newspaper clipping from the Cleveland Plain Dealer, dated April 2004. Local Navy corpsman returns home after 2 Iraq tours. The photo showed a younger Thompson in dress blues standing next to his wife at Cleveland Hopkins Airport. The article was brief, mentioning his service with Marine infantry units and his multiple commendations. She dug deeper, found a Marine Corps newsletter from 1971 that mentioned a hospital corpsman who'd saved 6 Marines during a firefight near Da Nang. No name given, just HM2 Thompson performed above and beyond the call of duty under heavy enemy fire. Then she found the obituary. Patricia Thompson, beloved wife of Michael, died in 2010 after a long battle with cancer, survived by her husband of 38 years. No children listed. Suddenly, Thompson's quiet solitude made terrible sense. He'd spent his career saving lives, came home to civilian life, watched his wife die slowly in a hospital not unlike St. Mary's, and then he'd chosen to stay, to keep serving in the only way he knew how. Chen realized she was crying. The next night, Chen arrived early for her shift. She found Thompson on the 4th floor, methodically cleaning the ICU. When he saw her approaching, he nodded politely but kept working. "Mr. Thompson," she began, then stopped. "I mean, Master Chief?" Thompson looked up, surprised. "I looked you up," Chen said quietly. "I know what you did. In Vietnam, in Iraq." Thompson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long." Chen moved closer. 47 lives, Mr. Thompson, and last night you made it 48. "I don't keep count anymore," he said, but his voice was softer. "Why didn't you ever go back?" "To medicine, I mean. You could have been a PA, A nurse, hell, probably a doctor with your experience. Thompson was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried weight Chen hadn't heard before. After Iraq, after Patricia got sick, I tried the civilian medical world, but it's different when you're not getting shot at. People argue about insurance, about protocols, about who's in charge. He shrugged. Here, I can still help. Quietly. No politics, no bureaucracy. Just help. Chen understood. In the trauma of combat, medicine was pure. Save the life in front of you. Move to the next casualty. In civilian hospitals, it was complicated by money, ego, and endless regulations. The staff should know, Chen said, about who you are. Thompson shook his head. I'm not hiding. But I'm not advertising either. This works for me. Over the following weeks, word spread quietly through the hospital. Not gossip, not drama, just quiet recognition. A nurse here, a resident there, learning that the man who cleaned their workspace was a decorated combat veteran who'd saved more lives than most of them ever would. The change at St. Mary's was subtle but unmistakable. Thompson noticed it first in the small things. Nurses nodding respectfully when he passed, residents stepping aside to let him through instead of treating him like furniture. Someone had spread the word, quietly and respectfully. Dr. Martinez, the attending, approached him one night while he was cleaning Trauma 1. Master Chief, Martinez said simply. It was the first time anyone at the hospital had used his rank. Thompson looked up, surprised. Dr. Chen told me what happened the other night, and she told me who you are. Martinez extended his hand. It's an honor to work with you, sir. Thompson shook his hand, unsure how to respond to recognition he hadn't asked for. I served too, Martinez continued. Army, Medical Corps, Afghanistan. Nothing like what you did, but I know what it means. Word spread through the veteran community at the hospital. More people had served than Thompson had realized. A few nurses who'd been Army medics, an orderly who'd done 2 tours in Iraq. They didn't make a big deal of it, but they understood. Months passed. Thompson continued his routine, but something had shifted. He wasn't hiding anymore. He'd never really been hiding, but now he didn't feel like he needed to be invisible. Chen would often stop to chat during her shifts. Sometimes she'd ask medical questions, drawing on his decades of experience. Other times they'd just talk. One night, after a particularly difficult case, she asked him something that had been bothering her. Do you ever regret it? Not pursuing medicine after you came back? Thompson considered the question while he methodically cleaned a spill in the hallway. You know what I learned in Vietnam, he finally said. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is be where you're needed, when you're needed. Doesn't matter if you're a general or a corpsman or a guy with a mop. What matters is showing up. He gestured around the quiet hospital corridor. I show up here every night. Maybe I save a life. Maybe I just clean up blood. But I'm here. Chen nodded, understanding more than she had when she'd started her residency. Besides, Thompson added with a slight smile, you young doctors need someone to keep you humble. Marcus Williams recovered fully from his motorcycle accident. He never knew that his life had been saved by a decorated combat veteran with a mop and bucket. To him, Dr. Chen was the hero who'd sewn him back together. Chen never corrected him. Thompson's story didn't make the Cleveland plain dealer. There was no ceremony, no recognition dinner. He preferred it that way. But everyone at St. Mary's knew who he was now, the quiet man who'd served his country for 23 years and was still serving, one clean floor at a time. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never stop serving, even when no one was watching. They don't need parades or medals or recognition. They just need to know that what they're doing matters. Michael Thompson understood that better than most, Every night he still pushed his gray utility cart through the halls of St. Mary's, still mopped floors and emptied trash cans, still kept watch over the people who couldn't watch over themselves. Because some men don't retire from service, they just find new ways to serve. And sometimes, when a young resident was in over her head and a life hung in the balance, they stepped forward and reminded everyone what duty really looks like. So tell us, have you ever met someone like Michael Thompson? Someone who served quietly, without fanfare, carrying decades of experience and wisdom behind a humble job title? Share their story in the comments. Tell us their name. Honor them the way they never honored themselves. Because at the Human Stories, we believe that the most powerful stories are the ones whispered in hospital corridors, not shouted from rooftops. Subscribe if this story moved you. We share these forgotten heroes' stories every week. And remember, next time you see someone mopping a floor or taking out trash, look twice. You might be standing next to a legend.